I just knew too much. Does that make me crazy? Does that make me crazy?
The Killing Joke is a 1988 Batman comic, penned by Alan Moore, illustrated by Brian Boland, and colored by John Higgins. Aside from being a very interesting examination of the Joker and Batman's relationship with him, it is notable for having the Joker paralyze Barbara Gordon, which would eventually lead to her transformation into wheelchair-bound superhero Oracle. The comic has also been under heavy fire from feminists who don't appreciate the handling of her victimization. I think that it's problematic, but not as bad as it is often considered. Alan Moore has had an interesting relationship with feminist critics, to say the least. He has a tendency to write good female characters with a lot of respect for them in the narrative, earning him respect from feminist critics. And he wrote Promethea, a comic about a goddess figure that was explicitly based off of a somewhat obscure form of feminist philosophy, and the series served as inspiration for an episode of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. He is often praised as a feminist, and he's also hated as a misogynist who supposedly gets off from writing scenes of sexual assault. He's a bit like Joss Whedon in that regard. Unlike Joss Whedon, I don't have as much of a handle on this guy, but I'm not sure his sexual assault scenes are portrayed as sexy, so much as fitting within narratives that also tend to have a lot of sexy elements. I think criticism of The Killing Joke tends to be overblown in that regard, though I'm not giving the book a complete pass either. I should point out here that this is the first and only Batman comic that I've read. I'm not a stranger to the extended franchise of movies, cartoons, video games, the series Gotham, etc., but I never really got into comic books as a kid, so I don't really understand continuity aside from stuff I've picked up from cultural osmosis and stuff I've deliberately researched. I might slip up on some minor details, but I think I'd be on point in my overall point, so no one freak out, okay? It starts on a dark and stormy night, when Batman visits Arkham Asylum to visit his old nemesis, the Joker. The clown-faced psychopath sits at a table in his cell, quietly playing solitaire. Batman sits across from him to talk about where their lives are heading. If the Joker keeps up his deadly games, it will inevitably end up with either of them killing the other. Batman wants to offer him a way out. The Joker ignores him, however, and Batman soon discovers that it's not the Joker at all. It's a patsy hired to pretend to be the Joker, while the real Joker is free in Gotham. Batman launches himself onto the new mission of locating the real Joker and taking him into custody again. The Joker is currently on a mission to take revenge from Commissioner Gordon for imprisoning him in the first place. He acquires a dilapidated carnival and sets it up as his torture camp. With a gang of thugs, he storms into the Gordon apartment and shoots Barbara Gordon. She collapses onto a table, and James Gordon tries to fight them off while the Joker mocks him. Of course, he's not a fighter anymore and he goes down hard. The Joker then sexually assaults Barbara by undressing her and taking photographs. Whether or not he literally rapes her is left ambiguous, but he at least sexually assaults her. I don't believe that this is necessarily written or drawn for titillation. Some readers could get something from it, but it's not there explicitly in the text. The gritty details of the illustration emphasize the horror of the violence, more than providing an avenue for readers to participate in taboo pleasures. I think it's just a well-done, scary story about an evil man victimizing good people, and that the writing and drawings lead us to appreciate the victims. The one panel, and then later the photographs, are from the sexually violent perspective of the Joker. We also have one panel that is a really scary view of the Joker from her perspective, leading us to sympathize with her. That's only one of the issues, though. There's also the fact that this female character is victimized for the sake of male characters. Depending on the depiction, I'm reasonably okay with characters suffering sexual violence if it's done as a part of their own journeys. In Dollhouse, all of the actives are sex slaves working towards liberation, and specifically there's the Priya-Sierra plotline, where Nolan makes Priya a sex slave, giving her the Sierra persona. We get to know her as Sierra, then she gets to stab Nolan to death as Priya. She becomes Sierra again, and then later turns back into Priya, and it's just an overall character arc that has sexual violence in it. In The Killing Joke, however, it's really just about three men: the Joker, Batman, and James Gordon, with Barbara Gordon caught in the middle. Once she's victimized, she's pretty much out of the story, and it becomes just about Batman and James Gordon being affected by her assault and angry at the Joker. Her eventual establishment as Oracle does nothing to negate her character's poor handling in The Killing Joke. Within the context of the one-shot book, she is effectively stuffed in the refrigerator. The character was just not respected properly, with Alan Moore describing editor Len Wayne greenlighting his decision to paralyze her with the derogatory words, "cripple the bitch." Thus, Batgirl was stopped in her tracks for a drama about 3 men. As that drama goes on, we see the Joker's origin in a series of flashbacks. He was an aspiring comedian with a pregnant wife, looking forward to having a family, who was stressed about his ability to make money and be a provider. After flubbing an audition, he got angry with his wife for being disappointed, raging a moment before collapsing into sobs. I think this portrays him as a volatile person before his total mental breakdown. Though he's always the focus, it also portrays the wife as sympathetic and avoids making it all about the nice guy having to deal with a nagging wife or whatever. For all he's ordinary in the flashbacks, his domestic realm is injected with the gothic morbidity characteristic of Batman, and it's ultimately about fear of the violence lurking in the hearts of ordinary people. In order to make money, Proto-Joker made a deal with some gangsters to help pull off a heist. On the day he had to do it, the report comes in that his wife was in a mechanical accident. She was killed instantly and the fetus was non-viable, so he just lost his whole life's purpose in one moment, and his reason for doing this dangerous stunt. That character is totally stuffed in the fridge. She has no purpose beyond making the Proto-Joker story more dramatic. The gangsters weren't just going to let him out of the deal, though, and it turns out that they wanted him to dress up as their supposed leader, actually a series of patsies dressed up to misdirect Batman, which makes a nice parallel with the guy in the beginning. Things went south and he fell into a lake of chemicals that turned him into the Joker. The flashbacks are intended to give him a sympathetic backstory to contrast with where he is now. As soon as it was done, though, DC didn't want it. The Joker has agreed to work better as a mysterious figure, so they put in a line about him knowing multiple ideas for his origin and not remembering which story is true, thereby making this particular origin story relevant only to the Killing Joke, which works in itself as somewhat of an alternate continuity. It is pretty much a self-contained story. Anyway, the Joker tries to drive James Gordon insane, to make him as crazy as the Joker. He does so through traumatizing him while subjecting him to bizarre imagery, like circus freaks dressed in fetish gear. The fact that these characters are supposed to be trippy in that they wear feminine clothing while apparently being male does come off as a bit transphobic, and homophobic in a general sense, especially as the gritty illustrations make them look scary. In the middle of this, he's subjected to images of his daughter's sexual victimization, which again makes it more about the 3 men than her. The whole idea of driving someone insane doesn't actually make sense. It seems like it came from a general misunderstanding of mental illness. A person can get PTSD, but they don't hallucinate or lose their consciences. It's like a pre-understanding of the phenomenon of mental illness. To a degree, the book communicates this because it doesn't work, and it's implied that the Joker just doesn't get it, but it probably shouldn't make up such a substantial part of the narrative. Even if it doesn't work, the idea's replication could make a lot of readers think these misguided ideas about mental illness are accurate, and could color their reactions to real people with mental illness that they could encounter in the future. Even though the Joker got away, the Batmobile didn't lose its wheels, and Batman comes in and rescues James. He confronts the Joker, who calls Batman crazy and asks for his origin story, and they fight until the Joker finally runs out of tricks. Batman finally delivers his message. He says it doesn't have to end in death, that Batman could help rehabilitate the Joker. The Joker tells a joke. There are 2 guys in a lunatic asylum, and one night they decide to escape. They get up onto the roof, and they see freedom just across a narrow gap onto the next roof over. The first guy jumps across with no problem, but his friend is afraid of falling. The first guy says he could shine the flashlight across the gap so that the second guy could walk across on the light beam. The second guy says, "What do you think I am, crazy? You turned it off when I was halfway across." The joke emphasizes the theme of madness and suggesting that Batman and Joker aren't so different. It would have to be a bit of a weirdo to dress up as a giant bat after all. It's not really insanity though, just weird. And this misunderstanding of insanity continues to be problematic. It's not just being weird and dressing in a costume or participating in BDSM games. All of Comic-Con would be insane if that were true. In the role of the guy with the flashlight, Batman is not imprisoned by his supposed insanity, but he is affected by it. He offers the Joker his help, but can't help him because his idea of help is foolish and a sign of this insanity. The Joker refuses because he feels like Batman would betray him, but there is an underlying understanding that his help is fundamentally worthless. The Joker laughs at the joke, and at the absurdity of their situation. After a moment, Batman also sees the absurdity and laughs too. The two of them laugh together, and then Batman grabs the Joker to kill him, laughing like the Joker would. Eventually, the laughter stops. And so concludes The Killing Joke. It's a good story, the pace is decent, the graphics are nice and edgy, though I personally find the Proto-Joker's villain costume to be a bit silly. It's like Magneto crossed with an 80s band. I'm reasonably into the story. At the same time, however, it is massively messed up in its portrayal of Barbara Gordon. It's not just a problem she faces in an overall character arc, like Bane breaking Batman's back. No one was thinking about Oracle when this thing was written, and it's so self-contained that it seems to end with Batman killing the Joker. It is really just her victimization for the point of making a story about three men more dramatic. I don't agree that the sexual victimization was supposed to titillate anyone, but its use is problematically male-centric. It's also just not necessary to make the Joker's attacks sexual. It could be sufficiently violating without sexual violence. The use of sexual violence emphasizes male ability to degrade women, and makes it about a male villain putting a successful female superhero in her place as a woman to be hurt by male power. I have no idea what Alan Moore is like as an individual, or what his overall body of work would suggest, as I've only read a few of them, but The Killing Joke is misogynistic, homophobic, and perpetuates problematic misconceptions of mental illness.